Welcome to Organizational Sherlocks, the podcast where business meets psychology and your organizational puzzles meet their match.
Join us for captivating stories and practical solutions to unravel your toughest challenges.
I'm Dr. Elizabeth Fleming.
And I'm Morgan Ashworth, your guides to a prescription for business success.
Let's dive in.
How you doing, Elizabeth?
Doing great today. It's chilly here in Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm enjoying the fall weather for sure.
We're officially in fall.
Yes, we are. But I'm loving it, definitely. And I'm actually really excited for this episode because Darien, my mentee, is joining us today.
Yeah, and for all of those who wonder who the IO behind the scenes is, you get to meet him today, which is also really exciting. I love it. Hey, Darien.
So, hello, everybody. Just for a brief intro, my name's Darien. Graduated from Springfield with my degree in IO, and I've kind of been working with Organizational Sherlocks in the podcast for a while, as you might have heard my name. Really just excited to be able to contribute instead of just watching this time. Really looking forward to it now.
Yeah, Darien was actually saying, he's like, I don't know if I can take the minutes for this because he takes minutes as we do episodes. And I'm like, don't even worry about it. Just talk. This is just a conversation.
Yeah, and I'd argue, Darien, that even though you're not always on camera or whatever it may be, you contribute a whole heck of a lot to this podcast. So we'll give you kind of a golf clap for that because I think you do a really nice job helping us and keeping us on track. So thank you for that.
I always try to make my presence at least a little bit known.
There you go.
Awesome. Well, Darien and I met thanks to Springfield College. I actually, interestingly enough, worked with a couple of his classmates on a project. At one point in time, they did a project with my company, doing a blueprint for an organization to offer certain incentivization or intervention methods there. It was focused on incentives, though, with our employees. And so got to give them a little bit of a learning experience, which then turned into, I went and spoke at Springfield College, and Darien was one of the big organizers. So we met, and then we stayed connected, and then eventually Darien worked with me in a mentorship period earlier this year. And I know we obviously have continued on since then. He was working with us with Organizational Sherlocks, plus the mentorship, plus finishing school. So he definitely knows how to juggle responsibilities real well.
Especially, I always think it was fun with how we met in general because it was completely coincidental, I feel like. And then it just kind of blossomed into this wonderful relationship that we've had and worked on a bunch of things and collaborated since then.
Yes, certainly. I know that when, we had connected, I remember saying, I was like, wow, you think a lot like me. And so I wanted to kind of help you get to that next step in your career, which is, building that self-confidence and kind of learning the more professional side of IO psychology rather than the educational side that you've got under your belt. And just couldn't fathom how much, though, that we really kind of aligned in the way that our mindsets were. So I was looking forward to working with you before we even agreed to the mentorship.
And you called it out really early as well. I think it was maybe right after you have presented, you were like, we feel very, very similar to each other. And I hadn't really seen it at the time, but more and more as we've met and done more things, I've entirely seen it.
Yes, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, I think of our conversations, because Darien and I will still meet off camera oftentimes, and we will talk about anything and everything. And I mean, we've talked about anything from books that we're reading to things going on in the world to, our opinions regarding that. And it's kind of funny to see how, people that are alike come together. Hence, Elizabeth and I wanting to start this podcast too.
That is right. It's funny because I feel like I'm such a data nerd because as you're talking about, Darien, you maybe didn't see it, but, as soon as Morgan did and all of that, there's totally a couple of data points in a tool that I use that would point to exactly this, this idea of being kind of insightful or picking up on the logical or thinking cues of the people around you. Some people are really skilled at that. And it just makes me think that just another application of IO translated into real life, which I think is really neat. So
I love that. I would love to take that because I feel like that's kind of who I am. That's why I'm kind of that last tier person that does the final interviews for everyone because I really get to know who people are very quickly. I do joke that I'll like kind of measure people's big five personality. Like I'll measure each one within a percentage range and say, I think you fall in this range. And then I make them go take it after the fact. This is just friends. I make them go take it after the fact and I'm usually spot on. They're like, how? And I was like, I don't know. I can talk to you for 5-10 minutes and get a sense of who you are.
Yeah. I mean, hey, there's a lot of power again in assessment and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, if you want to take it, let me know. It's a fun one. I really like it. So
it'd be cool to combine the two because
Yeah.
I feel like I have this level of intuition, and then the testing that you do and you use in your everyday life, Elizabeth. That's kind of what proves intuition. Something we talked about within the hiring world too.
Yeah, and how it shows up is really cool and important too. So, but we again don't have to talk about assessment today. It just made me think about that.
Oh, you're always going to talk about assessments, Elizabeth.
I am.
You're the psychometric girl.
I am a psychometrics person. I am teaching quantitative research and get to talk about descriptions of continuous data today, or coming up here soon with my class. So, if anyone wants to nerd out on statistics and research, let me know. But Darien, you said something before we got on the recording, just about, a lot of the different things that you and Morgan have been doing together. And I'm curious if you'd be willing to share a little bit about what the mentorship has been like for you, and maybe if there's like one or two things that were really rewarding, or you felt like, wow, I'm so glad I had that experience. If you'd be willing to share about that at all.
Yeah, of course. So I actually immediately what comes to mind is something on the second week of like doing the mentorship, because I was told to do some research and kind of start putting something together. And the product that I had finished by the time that we were meeting, like I wasn't happy with it at all. I personally thought I had done like a really poor job. And when I had initially brought it to Morgan, we had kind of talked about it. It completely alleviated that fear first off, but it also really reaffirmed myself and made myself kind of a bit more confident in what I was doing, because the product I'd made was completely fine. It felt to me as though it wasn't at all. And I think one of the main things that I really gained out of the mentorship massively was tackling imposter syndrome. It really gave me the freedom and the space to kind of explore my interests and what I wanted to do, and then empower me to go further and do more with that. So I think frequently throughout the whole entire mentorship, there were multiple opportunities where I was given creative freedom kind of on things, and then just left to run with it and see the results of what I produced. And I really think it helped me tackle imposter syndrome and just gain confidence in myself in terms of doing these things. And one of the other things, just as a slight tangent, that it had also massively helped me with was unleashing that creative side of myself. I think at a different point, we talked about adding to presentations and making them look prettier. And before, my public speaking kind of carried me through most presentations, so I didn't care about what was in the background. But I definitely grew a lot in that area too, in terms of just making things more pleasing to look at.
Yeah, that'll be funny because our next recording, our next podcast episode, are with a couple of my mentees, and I gave the exact same feedback to mine.
So it's like bringing it into the real world, just like the idea of a professional coming out of school, no matter what their field is, and they have all this lingo that they know, but regular people don't know. It's just like the idea of translating that into regular terms. You also need to translate, the creativity of what you're doing into something that's pleasing to look at. Sounds like, the internal marketing we've talked about before too. And that is definitely something I pushed Darien in was, you really need this higher sense of creativity and organization that, presents well, communicates quickly, easily, efficiently, and effectively. And I think Darien did a really great job as he continued to work on it. I know I continued to work on it after the fact, and then Darien kind of got a sense for my style, because creative styles are going to be different, and that's okay. But it was good to see him, expand in that way.
Yeah.
So a little background on that project though was it was an orientation project. So it was like an orientation slideshow, and it was supposed to be a presentation that really welcomes people into the company, helps them get to know the company, helps them get to know the policies, procedures behind, because really trying to fight some of the misunderstandings that can happen, creates a dialogue for new hires as well, so that they can ask questions, they get to know their job, they get to build their career ladders at the company that, aren't definite, but something that they might have for goals, helps them automatically, align with the company in some way, shape, or form. And I think Darien did a great job of even changing the coloring to match the branding of the company as time went on, and grabbing logos and graphics related to the company that either the company uses or that were related to the topic. He did a really great job pulling that all together.
Yeah.
Oh,
go ahead,
I
Jared.
would say as well that part of my understanding on how to do that came from the fact that we did a lot of sit downs, kind of, where we weren't really discussing anything. It was mostly just me seeing how you work.
Yeah.
And I know we did that with the presentation. We had done that with job descriptions and a few other things at different points.
Mhm.
And being able to see firsthand how you work, compare it to my process, and then make changes and kind of add from there, massively helpful to that.
Yeah, I think that's something like we kind of talked about is, it's kind of training your own mindset in this other person. And so I remember while I was doing that work, I was talking through it. It's something I usually do silently, but I was talking through my process so that he would get an understanding. Funny enough, so we actually have talked about succession planning, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it again at some point in time. But we've talked about succession planning in the sense of, planning for the person behind you, and usually mentorship, training, there's something involved. Funny enough, at my company, we joke that our CEO, he needs to just talk out loud and have like one or two people, like one person, like every day, it switches off who it is, sit next to him while he's talking through his work and just saying everything that's coming to his head while he works, so that they can learn from him. Because he says he's not a good trainer, but he is a really good trainer, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and I think that like design stuff it's really important. Like it's like with my students, even that's feedback I give. Like doesn't have to be this like gorgeous, super intricate presentation or document or anything like that. But I will say that it's just psychologically, right? Like people buy in when they think things look nice, and so I think on that side, I wanted to say that before the design part, but then also like saying things out loud, it almost just like makes it real, and I will say, like, I'm somebody who speaks out loud. Like if I write a research article or whatever it is, I have to read it out loud to hear it myself, because that's usually where I start to identify, ooh, I maybe could have said that differently. I could make that more clear. Or, whatever, the journal is looking for this type of publication. It doesn't really have that tone, but I don't necessarily see it when I read it on screen. You know what I mean?
I totally do that too. Like when I finish something, I'll usually read it back to myself entirely, like verbally, and it prevents you from, having spelling errors at times. It prevents you from having run-on sentences, things that are explained weirdly. You can tell that a comma is missing or a comma shouldn't be there. For example, you make your grammar's off. Even I know certain times, like a software won't catch that you say the twice, but when you're verbally saying it, it will. And I know that's something, Darien and I even worked on, was like making sure spelling is good, making sure the proper wording is used. Also, when you are saying it back to yourself, like the job descriptions, can we say it in almost a motivational way that's inclusive too? So using their instead of his/her, something along those lines, and then being somehow inspiring, making people want to do this job too, through the way that the job description is written or the orientation is written.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think those are all really, really good points, and things that people don't always think about,
Yeah.
So
I feel like I can't really ask enough questions to Darien because, it was my mentorship. So I kind of
you
know.
can ask all the questions. You go right ahead. No, I'm just kidding. No, I mean, I think it's helpful to hear kind of a little bit about, what you've been doing and what you found value in. And yeah, I just want to know more. Like and obviously you and I have also been working together a little bit. And I will say for our listeners, Darien has been amazing in so many different areas, not just with the podcast, which I think is really cool. But yeah, I mean,
reminding us when we haven't had a meeting in a while too.
Yeah, that's also true. Yeah. Some good reminders out there. What are you looking to do? Like, what comes next? What are you aspiring for? Or I know it's a really big loaded question, but I'm just kind of curious if you've thought a lot about that.
As loaded as it is, I kind of expected something along these lines to be asked. I've definitely come to the understanding recently that I feel like I have a platform for a few things. One of them is I just love helping people. A lot of what I've done in general has been centered around giving help, and IO is a great place for that. But it kind of umbrellas under like DE&I training, like OD, like a bunch of different things in terms of just helping people. And like, I want to see people become their best selves. So training also kind of falls into that. It's a large umbrella of things, but I like really having the ability to put my creativity into it as well. Because I've come to understand I'm a super creative person. So designing and implementing a lot of things I think is going to really be where I excel.
And beautiful things, Darien, beautiful things.
After everything, 100%, it's got to be beautiful.
There's
no alternative. There's literally no alternative than that.
Yeah, that's actually something we worked on through your mentorship, right, Darren? Is what is your, specialty? What's your niche? Because IO has so many different areas you can go into. So do other industries like sales. You could go into, a certain type of sales, car sales versus this sales versus that sales, Not to get off track there, but there's so many specialties, no matter what you study, no matter what you're going to necessarily do in your life, whether it be a trade or getting a college degree. And we wanted to figure that out for Darien. We knew he liked L&D, but it was deeper than that. And, you've kind of hit it on the head, Darien. You said, you like D&I, you like the learning and development side of D&I, but you kind of like organizational development as a whole, and you want to help people reach their full potential. So do you remember what we kind of drove it down to is, the life cycle of something?
Oh, I'm not sure even if I did try to repeat it, I'm not sure it's going to be perfectly fluent in what I say.
No, I'm putting you on the spot. It's okay. We talked about, that life cycle of the employee. So I feel like Darien's focus in his career was, yes, we talk about the life cycle of the employee always as IOs, but I feel like he's really going to drive down on those job ladders, those opportunities, and the learning and development involved with creating, potential and increasing someone's potential, skill sets, yada, yada, yada. And I think, you're going to find yourself falling in the DE&I space eventually, because that's an interesting area for you. But we really talked about how he is probably going to be more of an employee-centric person that translates to the companies what these employees need to then help the company succeed. Because that's something that we always need to do as IOs, is we need to be that bridge. So help people reach their full potential. So first you help the employees, but then you help, get buy-in from the company, the employer, so that the employer can reach their full potential too.
And tied directly into that, I would say, like, as much as I love seeing people unlock their full selves, I am also such a big proponent of authenticity and seeing people be themselves. So not only unlocking like your true inner best self, but being who you are. Because I've always come from a place of, one of my favorite quotes that does not have anyone that said it, I believe, is the people who matter don't mind, and those who mind don't matter. And I've always kind of lived by that to a degree, and I want other people to experience that too, and creating a workplace where you can achieve being your best self. Like, I almost think of the movie Miracle in my head. Like, to me, that is like the peak of achieving like you at peak optimal, like operating. And then at the same time, let those people be themselves. Like, I think that's the end goal for me, is just create workplaces where that can happen.
Yeah, have a supportive environment where people lift each other up. I think that's so important. I know, obviously you might not, there's the blandness, the monotony that work sometimes brings when you have a very like typical task that you might do. But at the same time, if you're constantly all working towards the same thing and you're working together towards that, sometimes it's working together in a way that lifts them up eventually. We all have to put in work before we can see the rewards. Delayed rewards, as sometimes have seen. So, short-term versus long-term rewards.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you guys
Gary,
about a lot of
I have a
things.
question for you. It's going to put you on the spot a little bit. I'm being Elizabeth today, putting people on the spot. Is there anything in your mentorship you wish you had gotten out of it that we worked on that we didn't necessarily work on?
Now that's a loaded question.
I feel like the answer I'm going to give is almost a cop out to a degree, just especially because I'm in the job search right now. So we tackled a lot of the really technical, really good stuff that like was really going to be good for my cognitive abilities and thinking.
Mhm.
Uh, it wasn't as we also had went over filing and things to that degree, but we didn't really go over as much like using HR systems, I want to say, kind of. And in securing some first jobs, I see that a lot just in things in general that they want like the basic HR skills. And it's like I can bring you everything elevated above that, but I just don't know as much about payroll or something
Mhm.
along those lines. Uh,
Mhm.
so if anything, I think it would just be that. But for what I got, it was more than enough to put me in a position that I feel comfortable to excel in.
Yeah, almost
Mhm.
like the software usage, the maybe the more administrative skills. Yeah, we talked about filing a little bit, but it's not like you're going to get to practice that unless you're at a company. And that's why, entry level roles are so important that companies are missing these days. It says entry level, but you need 2 years of experience somehow, right?
Mhm.
And so that's definitely difficult. But Darien, I'd be happy to show you through some of the systems I've used in the past and meet again. So if you want to kind of check them out, obviously I've worked with all, well, mostly PEOs. I've worked with non-PEOs as well, but I've worked with ADP, TriNet, Paychecks, goodness, Insperity, Bamboo HR, Gusto. I've worked with so many different ones. So I'd be happy to kind of take you through some of that. And then if not, taking you through the softwares, but also kind of talking about the payroll process and what that looks like and taxes. Um, Maybe even
Well, I think.
connecting you
Oh, sorry.
with
Keep going.
people. But sorry, connections are everything is what I like to say. And so I'll connect you
Oh
with
yeah.
some other people that can help you with that.
Absolutely. No, I agree. Connections are everything. I mean, I think it's important too. Like even when you think about some of like the kind of HR generalist kind of responsibilities and duties and that kind of thing. I feel like we're like mentoring you on this podcast, but sorry. That's not what this was for, but
Said it
we're
was
kind
going to
of
be a
stuck
conversation.
in it. But no, I mean, I think though, I think it's important for people to realize, and not everyone does, is like there are some definite specialties there, like a lot of payroll specialists are specialized
That's
in
all
that,
they do.
right? Yeah, and I think that's an important call out too, because I mean, I've walked into roles in HR, right, in the past, and it's like, all right, I need you to run payroll. It's like, that's not my specialty. I've consulted with companies where I've recommended to them that they get a specialist on staff, so that they're making sure that they're, following the law and have a really deep understanding of all of those pieces. And I just think that's an important part. It's good to have that exposure and to understand kind of the foundational pieces. But I think it's also important for us as IOs or people in HR and all of that to be able to really stop and say, I respect that there are people who are specialized in certain areas,
Yeah.
and that may not
Yeah.
be your space, right? Like L&D or talent development might be your space, and that's great, and you just, I think everyone, like if you choose a specialty, you deserve that, I guess, recognition and
Focus.
respect. So
Yeah, you really deserve to be like in your area. Yes, it's good to have that general knowledge, and that's why I said I'd be happy to take you through some of it. But I have a payroll specialist at a PEO at Insperity who we currently
yep,
work with, and I wouldn't want to do my job without them. Because
no,
yes, I definitely explain certain laws to her at times. If you have that legal knowledge, it's very helpful. And we've talked about some legal knowledge there.
Mhm.
But so if you have that legal knowledge, it's helpful. But you should have someone that's doing the quote unquote grunt work or the day-to-day work of that position. I mean, for companies that are especially smaller, not too big in size, don't really want to hire out an external person, getting a PEO is so helpful. It's a separate company that truly handles all that for you. And even non-PEOs help you with that payroll companies.
Mhm.
So, but I think it could be helpful for you just to get at least a, you know, secondary view, meaning the type of person that works with a payroll specialist but isn't the payroll specialist.
mhm, yeah,
Uh, I did have a comment I want to make. I didn't think anyone would be arriving home around this time, so I might just like mute for a second just to make
oh
sure
yeah,
that's all set. But I do have a response to that in general. So just give
absolutely,
me one moment. I apologize.
You're
it's
fine.
okay. I think we just cut that part out.
Yeah, we will.
That works.
That's why it's easy to cut things out. And that's why it's like, stop. I like that you made that comment because it is important.
I mean, I just feel like some people are like so, like I can
You
do
don't-
everything. And it's like,
That's
I seriously was not expecting anyone.
Darien, don't worry about it. Hey, this'll,
and action.
So in regards to kind of everything that was just being said as well, I knew the moment that I brought that up, you were going to offer for me to sit down and chat with you on it in general. So I was expecting that, which 100% I'm okay with. But also the thing about it, like, yeah, it's something I feel like I missed out, but I don't feel like it was a necessary part of it, really. Because I could very easily go my whole career without ever touching payroll or anything along those lines. And I think, like, not to bad talk anyone who does that, but I don't think that's anything I want to do. So, like, for what I got out of the mentorship, it was perfect.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear that you felt like it was good. And yeah, sometimes you just gain a knowledge base from somebody else in the sense of more of like subliminal learning, something along the lines of just having a more global perspective, but it's not like you need expertise. You can have a global perspective without having expertise in a company, in a position, in HR. I mean, there's so many things that involve HR. People forget there's DE&I, there's L&D, there's hiring, there is the overall business strategy, there is, employee recognition. There's so many little pieces, and you can't necessarily focus on all at once. You can only be so specialized, and you can only have so much focus in one area at a time, or however many areas. The saying, jack of all trades, but a master of none. And so, but they do say, but still better than a master of one is actually the very end of that. So it's good to have a global perspective, but to be have some sort of expertise is very helpful to know your specialty, like we talked about.
Absolutely.
I had always kind of viewed myself as the jack of all trades a little too. I'd never heard that ending with the better than a master of one. I think that's what you said. I really like that, because before I'd kind of just stuck to the jack of all trades, master of none type of saying. But I really love understanding everything and getting as big of a perspective as possible.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean you can get a really good perspective, but it's impossible for us to have, we have perspective over 10 parts of the hierarchy, but you can't have an expertise all the way down to the nitty-gritty on every single one, because if you had that expertise, then you're going to be working 20 people's jobs, not a singular job. Maybe you can oversee people that do those nitty-gritty, but you need to depend on those people to do their positions. That's why making people autonomous and independent, but still collaborative to an extent, is so important in companies, because everyone has their own position, but they might be able to cross over to an extent. Just can't have too much crossover unless there's true, duplicates of the position. Because if you have too much crossover, then it creates confusion on who's actually responsible for it, and a lesser amount of expertise on those positions.
Yeah, I think those are all really good points.
Yeah, but I mean, Darien, what else do you have to say to us? Obviously you have plans for yourself. You're out looking for positions right now. We're trying to help you along the way, obviously, because of the hiring world these days. But how are things going otherwise? Because we haven't, been working in a mentorship currently.
Things been going well, I would say. As stressful as the job hunt can be, which is effectively almost a full-time job now, things I would say are still going well. And if I could, actually, I'd love to talk on the tool that I was kind of working on that came from our mentorship.
Sure.
Yeah.
So working with onboarding, one of the things that I've kind of started developing, and in large part, I think, is thanks to the enabling of like my creative side, is an orientation tool. Kind of it hits on a lot of things realistically. It kind of is almost the jack of all trades of tools, I feel like. And I don't know how specific I really want to get into it, but the whole purpose of it really is to improve upon role clarity, create a symbiotic relationship between the organization and the individual, create more purpose for the individual at the organization, help set goals, improve authenticity, knowledge sharing, and even rates of mentorship. So it really hits on a lot of things. But it's something I've kind of been working on since the mentorship and trying to develop still and write a paper for and actually get it published and out there, because looking at it, It's really simple in nature, but I feel like it's almost an Occam's razor of it's so simple that it's just exactly what's
What it needs
needed
to be.
almost. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly what it needs to be. And it brings a little fun to the workplace, this tool that Darian's been working on. Obviously, he's working on it, and so he doesn't want people to necessarily take that idea. But we've been having lots of conversations regarding that, and here and there, just kind of helping you through with that research article. And I'm excited to see, what comes of it. And I'm excited to start testing it because we are going to test it actually at my company. So it's going to be fun.
That's
And
awesome.
it should be soon too. I did kind of stagnate on it a little bit just because I went into overdrive for applying for jobs for a little bit. But I'm getting back to working on it this week. So really soon, hopefully I should have a solid draft ready to push over to you.
Yeah, so there's a little cliffhanger for our listeners because Darien will be eventually sharing this. I'll help him share it out there. But first he's gonna try to get, something published of some sort before he shares it with the world. Well, thank you so much, Darien, for coming on. We are so happy to welcome you onto the podcast, really get to introduce you because, Darien is working behind the scenes for us. It's obviously nothing too much that he can't get a full-time job somewhere. But we really enjoyed having you on.
Instead of like sitting kind of to the side and just listening, it was absolutely fantastic to actively be a part of it and like contribute in the conversation today. And it's funny because I was like a little nervous beforehand, but it feels just like the conversation we were having before the podcast anyway.
Yeah.
Like our conversation just flows.
This is why it's a conversational one. This is for our listeners to get to know what informal mentorship might look like for them. And I think you've done a great job helping them understand it.
Yeah.
I really hope so as well.
Yeah. And again, Darien, I can't thank you enough for all of the help that, you've offered us in kind of in launching organizational Sherlocks and being a part of kind of the organic growth, I would say, that we've had. So thank you. And any employer would be so lucky to have you. So I hope that some of our listeners may know of something and maybe reach out because I think that you deserve the best.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate the kind words. You can always find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, right. Also, we're not letting you go. So we still want you to hang out with us from time to time, even if you have other commitments. So.
Was not planning on going anywhere, so do not worry.
Good deal.
Awesome. Well, before we log off, I'm going to put Elizabeth on the spot because yes, you always put me on the spot, so it's my turn.
Okay.
So Elizabeth's mentees are going to be joining us next episode, which we're really excited to have them on. It is a formalized program, but there's a level of informality to it. And they're going to let us know what they got out of their mentorship or how it's going. So one thing I want to ask Elizabeth before we go on is, what are you getting out of the mentorship as a mentor?
Yeah. I think that is a really great question. And it's, there's a lot of sides to it. I think, being a relatively new business owner, it is a really cool experience to, okay, let me back up a little bit and say that one of my goals is to have a practicum or an internship or something like that paid for my company. So I am trying to build up my client base for that reason, obviously, and for business purposes too. But I just believe so strongly in teaching and mentoring and helping people just gain experience and exposure. And so because of that, I think from this mentorship, it has given me the opportunity to bring two of my mentees along on the journey, right? Helping me to refine what I would see this kind of internship look like in the future. And also I have to be fully honest with you. Like there are times where they say things to me and I think, man, I wouldn't have thought of it that way. And so it really challenges me to think of things from a different perspective, both, for a lot of different reasons. I mean, we're in different points in our life, like some similarities between us with kind of like age and that kind of stuff. But in general, just different points in our life. So I'm getting a lot out of the experience. I absolutely love it. I was nervous, just like you, Darien, coming onto this podcast. I was nervous about what if I can't mentor well enough or whatever it is, that imposter syndrome sneaking in. But when you get into it, I think it kind of dissipates a little bit.
Yeah, I think our mentees keep us on our toes and they keep us thinking ahead, and they're doing research just like Darien here has been doing throughout the mentorship, and even with us here at Organizational Sherlocks.
Well, and I think, and I do want to say one last point, because I think this is really important. It's not just what I'm getting out of it or what my mentees or what you or Darien are getting out of it. I think there is a level of, kind of going back to what Darien was saying, the authenticity, and also a level of being vulnerable that a mentor must have, right? I have to be open to hearing feedback from them, both from their experience, kind of what they hope to get out of it. I hope that they challenge me, and I encourage them to challenge me, because I think that, again, it's not just helping them grow, but it's helping me grow. So if there's any call outs I have for future mentors or current mentors out there, it's to create that space, that psychologically safe space where your mentee can say, have you thought about doing it this way? Because I think there's a lot of power in that too.
Yeah, let them be an expert. I mean, as leaders, as bosses, as managers, you should have experts underneath you too. It shouldn't just be you as the expert. And so I think it's very important. So thank you. And I'm looking forward to, now that we've heard a little bit of what you've gotten out of the mentorship, we'll hear what your mentees have gotten out of it as well.
Hopefully they'll be kind. I have a feeling they will. They're pretty cool people. So
yeah, I don't think they're saying anything bad about you. Maybe they'll cop out like Darien though and just compliment you.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I don't know.
Nothing of what I said was a lie. It's all
I
very
think that's natural. It's natural, especially when you're sitting on a call with the person that you've been working with. I think it's natural to.
And let the person you're working with ask the question, ask the difficult.
Yeah, exactly.
Adds a little bit more weight to it.
Yeah, that's right. Well, thank you again, Darien. We appreciate you, and we appreciate you being here with us today, and appreciate all of our listeners who continue to come back and listen. So with that, this concludes another intriguing episode of Organizational Sherlocks. I'm Elizabeth Fleming.
And I'm Morgan Ashworth, reminding you that the journey to success is an ongoing investigation.
Stay curious, stay strategic, and keep utilizing insights to decode your business mysteries.
Join us every Tuesday for your next Whodunit. This is Organizational Sherlocks, closing today's case.
See you all next time.